Welcome to the Elephant TV. My name is Abdullahi and our guest today is Dr. Hawa. Dr. Hawa has worked on terrorism and counterterrorism, particularly around the Kenyan coast. Dr. Hawa, welcome to the Elephant TV.
Thank you, Abdullahi. Thank you for having me.
Today we'll be talking about terrorism and the question of framing along the Kenyan coast. And Dr. Hawa, I wanted to start with the incident that happened along the Kenyan coast, particularly in Mombasa, when Muslim youth took over a series of mosques in 2013 and 2014. That even generated two sets of narratives. One was that the youth were legitimate reformists, while another accused them of pursuing a hidden external extremist agenda. Can you unpack for us the impact of this framing, particularly within the broader war on terrorism or counterterrorism?
Thank you very much for this good question. I'd like to begin by maybe highlighting my goal and my interest in this issue. So like you pointed out, I've actually been researching on this matter for quite some time. So I'm talking from the perspective of not only research, I've done research in this field, at the same time, I'm talking as a Muslim who is living Islam, who is experiencing this religion, who has experienced it and understands how the dynamics are. So for me, there has been tension from my multi-faith, multi-religious upbringing back in upcountry Kenya, where I used to live, where I was brought up. And I've never seen this kind of tension taking place, especially after the onset of Al-Shabaab. So it was, for me, it was quite a lot of tension within me. And that's why I really was curious to understand what's going on. This politicization of religion, what led to it and all this. And this led me to my study. So as I speak, I'm frustrated like any other Kenyan. And I would love to see a harmonious society where different communities coexist with each other, and that this problem is eliminated or comes to an end. Going back to your question, we have to look back a little bit before I talk about the impact. I'd like to remind us a little bit about the history. This problem of Al-Shabaab began actually when the Islamic Courts Union, the dynamics that took place within Somalia at that time, that, led to the Islamic Courts Union taking, short takeover of power in Somalia, and then militarization within it that culminated in a small group of, the armed wing, so to say, of the group radicalizing. And radicalizing in this case, to me, means adopting more violent means. So then this small group of people moved to Kismayo, and then they settled ultimately in the south central part of Somalia. And then after that, we begin to see from 2008, 2009, Kenyans joining Al-Shabaab and mobilization taking place within Kenya. 2011, Operation Linda Nchi. And then we see, particularly in the narrative of Sheikh Abu Drogo and others, people being, a lot of politicization in the sense of saying that the state, the modern state is is forbidden in Islam, and democracy, and anybody associating with the state is an apostate. And so in this context, we saw some mosques being attacked by some rowdy youth, and which led to some killings. And around 2014, there was a killing of Sheikh Mohammed Idris, who has been labeled moderate, and versus radicals who, so-called radicals who took over these mosques. And of course, there were others who were killed as well before that, which was Sheikh Robo himself, Makaburi, and others. So what followed again around 2014, very importantly, are these what came to be known as the Masjid Musa raids, where there was a contention between police or security apparatus and these rowdy youth. So on the part of these youths, they said that some of these imams or religious leaders who were leading them, had no legitimacy and they were traitors, and therefore they should step down. And the aim in this case, among others, was to take over these positions and maybe install those that they favored. And on the other hand, the security apparatus accused these youths of operating militancy within the country, and that a mosque like Masjid Musa had become a hotbed of militarization and militant recruitment. And this is where now this dichotomous image appears or come in place. Where on the one hand we have, people, one group favoring, this perception that there's a hidden agenda, and on the other hand, we have people who are claiming that the state is illegitimate and all this. So it's kind of quite dichotomous. Impact of this is a kind of a black and white image, kind of black and white a portrayal of this problem, which is not the case. It's more complex than that. Fine. In terms of mobilization, of course, we know that there has been some mobilization taking place. On the other hand, we know that there has been a lot of challenges. There's a lot of complexity between within the Muslim community. Muslim leaders, mainstream Muslim leaders, so to say, have been accused of corruption, of not addressing issues affecting the Muslim community, have been compromised, and all these things. And all this is happening in the context of marginalization, narratives of marginalization. Like Hassan Zov was written very well about. If you ask any Muslim today on the street, they will tell you that they're marginalized, there's no job opportunities, the state is against them, educational opportunities are few, and all these things. So all this is happening in this context, and therefore, if anything comes to, kind of lights up these issues, it really becomes, it lights up like a bushfire and comes to the fore. And this is the context of all this. The impact has been a dichotomous image or presentation of this problem, which is very simplistic.
There are people who say this is reform. There are others who say, no, this is extremism. But you're suggesting that it's far more complicated and far more nuanced, and it's taking, behind, against the background of really long history of sense of marginalization and disempowerment. And so that leads me to, the second question about the Muslims themselves, right? On one hand, they are part of the larger Muslim ummah, the global Muslim ummah, right? The Muslim community that transcends boundaries. Secondly, simultaneously, they're also part of Kenya, which is fairly defined boundaries of what Kenyanness means. Would you kindly explain that, as it plays out within all the milieu of stuff that you've, of history and insight that you've provided? Are these two mutually exclusive, or in fact, they are both, one could be both, and there is no tension between, or there is tension between being part of an ummah and also being part of a Kenya, which is a nation state?
I think there are people who can address this issue better than me, who are doing Islamic studies, which is not really my area. But Kenya is not an Islamic state, and therefore it has a constitution And there has never been tension like we've witnessed in the past since the onset of Al-Shabaab. So which tells us that this is really not an inherent problem. We've seen that since the 1920s, the first Chief Qadi of Kenya, Sheikh Alamin Mazrui, and then in the 1960s, the Sheikh Salih Al-Farsi, who took over from him. They've all, they were actually, they lived in the context of Islamic reform, or so-called Islamic reform, the different waves of Islamic reform. But they still emphasize the compatibility between Islam and the modern state. So there's no tension actually. And if you ask me as Hawa, I will tell you that there actually, there's no conflict between some of these provisions in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Islam. Women's rights and Islam really, it's really compatible. I know it's an issue of interpretation, and this is where the tension is. This is where really a lot of tension emanates. But if you look at it really, I think from my own understanding, there's really very little tension with Islam, and therefore it is not an inherent issue. It's only in the 1990s with the emergence of, well, as an individual, I would say, we saw some elements of rejectionism in the actions of Sheikh Abdulaziz Remo, which I think is also, there's a lot of politics in that as well. But a kind of elements of, rejectionism. And of course, with what Abu Drogo was also preaching, which you cannot also really delink it from politics. There was a lot of, rejection of the modern state and all this, but I would say it is nothing inherent. Many scholars have actually, many Islamic scholars support this idea that there's no tension.
Thank you. And the other thing that I wanted you to speak about, which is part of the, slightly related to the first question, is, you talked about at the beginning where you say there is a sense of Muslims feeling that they don't have adequate jobs, schools and facilities in many Muslim majority regions are not up to the par. And then during this time, when there is that sense of, if you will, even dislocation between the state and the community, the war on terror starts, right? The passage of Prevention of Terrorism Act, Operation Linda Salama, Operation Sanitize Isli. And time has passed, the security agencies do it differently now. But do you think, or can you speak about to the, relations between the Muslim community on one hand and the security agencies on the other?
Well, I have to say that having conducted numerous fieldworks in these Muslim populated areas, it affects us as researchers, right? Too, it was really hard for me to win trust. Not really, I think I had my position really granted me a lot of privilege.
I can speak to that. The number of times, you want to speak to mothers of young men who have gone and joined or are suspected to have joined these violent groups, or they have been suspected to be in custody of security agencies. You want to speak to them, and they are very, very, very hesitant. Like an interview that ideally, or a research trip that will take 5 days, you have to plug in additional days just to build the trust of this population.
Absolutely, I totally agree with you. And for me, I had a number of pilot studies as well to go and talk to people. It needed a lot of lobbying amongst trusted people to be able to talk to me. And of course, I had to use a lot of what I've done and to legitimize myself and to show that I meant well for the community. So I think today as we speak, at least, or maybe to be more factual, when I was doing my fieldwork, I realized that there was, there was a shell that Muslim communities had built within themselves to shield them from some of this, what they see as violent actions against them or attack against them. I'm not saying that, we know that Al-Shabaab has mobilized, particularly amongst Muslims, and this is where the problem is. But at the same time, to homogenize the group and treat them as a single unit and put them in one box has really made this problem worse. And therefore, there's a lot of turbulence, even if we don't witness any confrontations today. To me, this is not a sign of positive peace, but a very bad status. When I was growing up, someone told me that in an accident scene, normally people who are doing first aid, they would run to help the people who are quiet, who are not really showing any reaction first than those who are crying and, weeping.
No, it's true. It's true. I mean, like you could see, if you take your time, you could see the tension under most of, what is perceived to be stability. But under it, I mean, I remember when I was there just a few years ago, you conduct one focus group discussions and you move to intensive individual interviews. People start breaking down, these are matters. They just break down, like the number of times that I had to stop, give them water, go away, or we'll reschedule. I mean, like I've seen, when you cross the Likoni, and there was a place where they used to go and watch football games. This guy was narrating to me. I mean, like, even when you are transcribing the notes, it's like, it shouldn't be how people live. People are living in absolute terror of security agencies.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is really the thing that I think I'm trying to call out here by saying that we should not assume that things are okay because they seem to be stable. There's a lot of things that are, people are not talking, and it's very dangerous when people are not talking. And therefore, my example is this, accident scene. You don't know what's going on. I'm sure the security apparatus has some idea of what is going on, but we don't have the full picture, I believe, of what is going on. And this is the danger going forward, because, these are opportunities for groups like Al-Shabaab to exploit. And this is how they mobilize. They mobilize by exploiting problems. So we cannot just say it is a problem of, a hotbed of terrorism, so-called terrorism. And on the other hand, it's, some rowdy youth trying to take over. There are issues that, of course, Al-Shabaab has capitalized in here. Not only Al-Shabaab, but who knows, maybe a bigger problem might be coming. So what I'm trying to say is that Muslim leaders, as people who understand these communities, they should be able to break this tension. And, there has to be some form of dialogue with this community, because activism is really flat at the moment. You speak about something and, the fear is, and of course, there are legitimate issues. Now in Kenya, generally, there are a lot of problems. Food prices shooting up, a lot of really social issues taking place, and there has to be a healthy conversation about this issue. But if a community fears, or members of a community fear that if they speak up about issues that they are legitimately paying taxes on, or then there's something really that is really wrong here. And Muslim leaders should be able to call out for dialogue. The state should be able to explain itself and what it is doing that is being misunderstood, if any. On the other hand, there has to be a healthy debate about these issues, and people should freely be able to talk about, some of these issues that affect them, like food prices, etc., without really fearing to be labeled terrorists or things like that.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Hawa. I know we can dig into this topic again sometime, but it's very fascinating that you're not only bringing, the reality as a scholar, lived experience, but also as a, both as practicing Muslim. I think there is a lot there. I think when the national media turns away inevitably into something else that is more hot, people forget that this is an issue that has been brewing for some time. And like you rightly said, just because things are quiet on the surface doesn't mean that everything is okay. Fascinating as always speaking to you. Thank you so much, Dr. Hawa.
You're welcome, Abdullah. If I may, can I please add one more point, which is, I think I'd like to really request that some of us who are really concerned about this issue, that we have to be listened to really, without any suspicion and without being seen as sympathizing. I'm not sympathizing with anybody. I would not sympathize with anyone. I think this is the same case with you. And I just would like to see how to contribute to this problem so that we have a very peaceful and harmonious society in Kenya. And it can only happen if we really unmask ourselves and remove this stigmatizing images that we give researchers and people who come from this community and are, well-meaning, trying to understand this problem. Thank you so much.
I know what you mean, because you're constantly within your community, you're seen as a native informant and people mistrust you. On the other side, state authorities look at you as somebody who is seen to be sympathizing, when what you are doing, in fact, is bridging that gap, because there's tremendous knowledge and trust gap that needs to be bridged. And knowledge is a good tool for that, because every time I was born and raised in the North. When I started doing some work along the Kenyan coast, what really stood out for me, and the reason why I had people trusting and be able to speak to me, was I could actually relate to some of the things that they are saying. We occupy a different planet, but it is remarkable. One of the things that I've learned through this project is there is so much lack of knowledge about other parts of the country. Kenyans, particularly from the south, I don't think they understand people in the north beyond the beaches and the sun that they go during Easter and other holidays. They don't understand people in the north. And I was trying to explain to someone how much of the national GDP livestock production contributes to. That person couldn't even understand. And so I think there is a serious need for bridging some of these gaps. We've got fundamental constitutional apparatus. The Constitution, particularly, it's a very radical document that a lot of us do not even realize how radical it is. And so I think there is a need for having, like you said, open dialogue without necessarily being suspicious of each other, having debate in good faith.
Absolutely, and there's a lot of bridge building. There are a lot of opportunities. Instead of just looking at, these mainstream terrorism debates, who is a terrorist, who is not, who is violent, who is not, who is this, who is that. There's a lot of things, underlying issues. There's a lot of opportunities to build bridges between Kenyan communities. And
Absolutely.
Most of our problems actually is because we do not know each other.
We don't.
As someone in Nairobi, we actually have people who have not been to the coast, and what they know about the coast, for example.
It's a usual stereotype.
Maybe this and that, and sometimes you sit somewhere at a corner and you just observe things and you just smile, especially during these periods when people go down to the coast for holidays. And of course, the other way also, there are people who do not understand. And I think if we had empathy for each other, if we really humanized each other, we would have less problems in this country. But then if we keep following the main narrative, the mainstream ideas being propagated out there without really making the initiative ourselves, then there's a problem. And but it needs also some interventions, and I think this is where a lot of opportunities are.
No, thank you so much, Hawa. Thank you. Brilliant as always. Can't wait for the next time when we get a chance to speak about these and many other issues of mutual interest. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Abdullah, and thanks for having me. Have a good day.
You too.
Thank you.